Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. The scariest thing happened to me. Volume 1, Story Number 1. The scariest thing that happened to me, I didn't know actually happened until the following day. I lived in an apartment in a not so good part of a dangerous city with my boyfriend who worked nights. One day our friend came over and called me to let him in our building in a hurry. Turns out this guy had been crouched by my car in the parking lot and had approached our friend and closed in on him. My friend pulled out a weapon and the guy ran off. Upstairs I noticed that the guy had left a green bundle near my car and assumed he would be back for it. It made me uncomfortable, so I suggested we call the cops. Now, 5 minutes after a cop showed up to ask where the guy had gone, SWAT, K9, and about 10 cars showed up and swarmed our area. Turns out the guy had escaped from county the night before with 2 other guys. He was in jail for assault with a deadly weapon and repeated domestic violence offenses. He had climbed the fence in the yard behind our building, where our landlord kept his camper, broke into the camper and stayed there the night before. He had stolen all the electronics out of it as well as a butcher knife and was trying to break into my car before my friend showed up. I'd been alone the night before and had taken my dog down to the yard to go to the bathroom. I noticed that the barbed wire on the top of the fence had fallen down, and my dog was nervous, but I brushed it off. The guy had been in the camper watching me the whole time, and I never knew it. Story number 2. Someone tried to break into my neighbor's house while I was babysitting their kids. I was 15 and I used to babysit for my neighbors down the block. They had a really nice house, 3 floors with a built-in garage under the house that connected to the basement. It was the family's most used entrance of the house, and they rarely locked the basement door as long as the garage was closed. They also had the type of security system where anytime a door opens, you heard beep, beep, beep. After the parents left one night, I was putting the kids to bed, and I heard the beep, beep, beep. I yelled out thinking it was the parents coming back for something, but no one answered. The system on the wall kept reading, basement door open. I was freaked out, so I called my dad and asked him to come by since he was only a few houses away. When he arrived, he told me to stay in the kitchen while he checked the house out before he could. We heard the beep, beep, beep again, and then the garage door opened. When we ran to the window to see if the parents were pulling into the driveway, they weren't. Instead, someone in a hoodie was running out of the garage door and into the woods behind the house. My dad ended up calling the cops. I'm still creeped out about it. Next story. This reminds me of a story my boss told me. Years ago, she was babysitting her little brother and cousin. She had gone to her bedroom in the basement to grab something and realized all her things on the windowsill had been knocked over onto her bed. She asked her brother about why he would do that, and he said he wasn't in her room, but she didn't believe him. She got the boys ready for bed in the bathroom by helping them brush their teeth and whatnot, all the while chatting to them. A few days later, her parents got a call from the police asking about details of that night, what my boss had been doing, things she said to her brother and cousin, etc. Turns out a convict had escaped a nearby prison and broke into their home while hiding from police. He was behind the shower curtain the entire time and told police this, including details of the conversation my boss had with her brother and cousin in the bathroom. She says she always opens shower curtains whenever she goes now. Can you blame her? Next story. This happened many, many years ago when I was but a youngster. In my suburb there had recently been a spate of break-and-enters. Where I lived, they tend to happen suburb by suburb. Like one suburb will get hit, a bunch, then there'll be nothing for a while. My family had gone away for the weekend, but I had stayed home because I had to work. I was up at midnight watching a James Bond movie, Live and Let Die for those playing at home, with all the lights in the house turned off. And I heard a really sudden and strange thud from my kitchen/living area. I instantly knew it was a weird noise. Nothing in the house made any noise like that. so I was immediately suspicious. Just as I was about to get up to go and check it out, I heard it again. That's when I realized it was actually the thudding of the thick glass sliding door from the kitchen to the outdoor patio. As I mentioned, all the lights are off, so I'm making my way through the house turning lights on. When I reached the light switch to turn on the patio light, I hit all the lights on at once, including the light at my front door, which is visible from where I was now standing. We had those glass panels next to the front door, which I could now also see out since the light was on. There was nobody at the patio area at this time, but through the glass panels at the front door I saw someone sprint past and out of the yard. Even though I couldn't see any detail, it was unmistakable to see that it was a person running past. It later occurred to me that they were most likely kicking the glass patio door to try and smash it and break in, as I later learned that this is apparently one common method of entry during burglaries. I initially assumed they were hitting it with something, but a boot would explain the deep hollow thud of the noise better than striking it with something. It was pretty spooky at the time. Just that sudden realization of that is not a normal noise. Kind of crazy what your intuition knows in moments like that. Next story. I was working on a farm in Northern California. It was a startup and I was the only person at nights on an isolated 650 acres. After dinner, I was walking from the lodge to my cabin about 100 yards away. It's dark, so all I can see is what my flashlight illuminates, plus a little on the periphery of the main beam. Anyway, walking back and in the periphery I see red eyes staring at me, unblinkingly. I turn the light on and all I see is a pale white mass behind the still red eyes. I freaked. It takes a lot to get me jumpy, but this sure as hell did it. Picture a 6 foot 5 inch, 260-pound man. Now picture him letting out an unbelievably high-pitched scream and straight sprinting into his cabin 50 yards or so. The next day, I was talking to one of the guys that came up to help out during the day, told him what happened, and he about fell over laughing. I think the sincere terror in my voice as I described the pale monster really drove the funny nail home for him. Well, turns out there's such a thing as albino deer, and just so happens one frequents this property. Nobody thought to warn me beforehand. Next story. My parents let me walk home from school alone when I was in the 4th grade. In my now adult opinion, that's way too young. So I walk home from school, house is empty, till about 5 when my parents get home. So I'm doing my usual routine, Mountain Dew Code Red, Doritos, 3Ds, and Toonami on Cartoon Network. So I'm only home for about 3 minutes when I hear a knock at the door. 99% of the time I stay quiet and just wait for whoever to leave. But for whatever reason I actually go to the door and called out, "Who is it?" Stranger dude voice on the other side, "Hey, it's your buddy Mike." I don't have a grown-ass man buddy, Mike. I'm in the 4th grade. My heart went cold and it jumped to my throat. Goosebumps. Couldn't move. I was paralyzed, terrified. Dude says again, "Hey, open the door. We gotta go." And he jiggles the door handle really hard. Then he knocks again. Bam, bam, bam. Jiggles the door handle hard again. I'm still like 1 foot away from the door. I actually never moved since all of this started because I didn't want him to hear my footsteps. After a minute of silence, I heard a car door close and he drove away. I'm still freaked out for about the next hour, and worst thing, I was now super paranoid about walking to and from school because obviously he followed me that day and I had no idea I was being tailed. Next story. When I was a teenager, I was alone with my girlfriend and my parents weren't home. We were house sitting for my mom, who was on vacation with her boyfriend. We were sitting there in the living room, which is right next to the front porch. It's about 12:30 a.m. or so when we hear loud and heavy footsteps on the porch. A guy goes next to the window and goes, "Shit!" really loud. I'm assuming it's because the curtains are closed. This really spooked us because the couch we were sitting on was near the windows, and had those curtains not been closed, he would have seen us. Freaked out, we shut off all the lights in the house as the footsteps went away. We looked out the window to see if there's anyone out there, and there's a big burly man with a kind of plastic bag We live in a small town out in the middle of hillbilly country. So any stores or takeout restaurants are closed at this point in time, so it's a mystery where he got the bag and what was in it. This guy walks down the street, turns around back towards my house, and disappears into a parking lot next door to us. Not 2 minutes later, we hear the doorknob to the side door, which was thankfully locked, jiggle. My dog started going absolutely insane at the noise. He's a small dog with a loud bark, so I think he scared him away, but that was that. We debated calling the cops, but never did, and nothing ever came of it. Luckily. Next story. While my house was sort of out further away from town, we had neighbors, but they were few and far between. There was a hiking trail opening across the street from our driveway, which was very long and can't be seen from the trail. My room had a large window facing out to the driveway. Anyway, I was home alone, cleaning my room and singing We Are the Champions extremely loud, as well as playing it on my TV. Looked up and suddenly see a man power walking up my driveway very quickly. It's obvious no one is home but me since there aren't any cars in the driveway. So I ran to the front door, which was open because it was hot outside, and locked it and closed and locked my window. Turns out my bro friend did not like that. I called 911 because he was still approaching my house, and I was getting scared by his demeanor. And while on the phone with the 911 operator, he started banging on my front window by the door and then the door itself. He tried kicking in the door and tried breaking the window. I went and hid in my mom's closet because it locks from the inside only with a knife until the cops showed up. By the time they showed up, he was gone, and there were hand and shoe prints all over the door and front window, and some handprints on my bedroom window. They found him about an hour later walking up and down my street. He told them that he heard my pretty singing voice and just wanted to say hi. He was also drunk, but admitted to being sober at the time of the incident and started drinking after I rejected him. He also told them that he planned to come back and have some fun with me after he found out that I was home alone, and that he was waiting for nighttime to come back. So yeah, I had a lot of nightmares about that one. Next story. I was working late one night and had told my brother and sister that when I got back we could order pizza. I got home at around 9:30 and walked through into the front room where they were sat waiting, both looking pretty confused. They told me they thought I'd already come home because they heard the front door open, followed by me running up to my room. Creepy enough, I had a quick check upstairs, nothing there, so proceeded to order the pizza. Now, I don't fully believe in ghosts. I've always thought that there could be something, but I'm not the kind of person who has to have a logical reason for everything. Anyway, we sat waiting for our food to arrive when one of our three dogs sits up with his ears pricked and essentially watches somebody walk into the room and sit in the empty armchair. Then dog 203 starts growling, staring at the armchair. Dog 203 is a rescue and is very wary of people he doesn't know, and was acting exactly how he would toward a stranger. Dog 3 then plods into the room, chilled as anything, and goes to jump into his favorite armchair. He gets to it and stops, staring directly at face level as if somebody is there. At this point, I'm sure you can imagine we're all freaking out. He just sits beside the chair growling, and he's definitely not comfortable with whatever's sitting there. My siblings and I have all frozen. There's a horrible feeling in the room. We all sat staring at the armchair on edge when the front door opens. My mom had come home early and the dogs all run to see her. I don't think I slept properly again in that house. This seemed to have tied in with a few other creepy things that happened, but I won't go into that right now. Next story. There are a few things which seem to have happened around a similar time in my life. I'll go back to about a month before my original comment. I developed a friendship with somebody who I'd known for a few years but never knew well. We were hanging out a bit and she invited me round to hers for some drinks in the sun. When I arrived at the address she provided, I realized why it was so familiar. I had spent a lot of time there growing up, as my mom's childhood best friend lived there for a good few years. There are two parts to the house. The front of it is the original building, and the extension is essentially another house in the garden. Both buildings joined by a long open corridor. I told my friend I couldn't believe she lived there and explained about my mom's friend. I also mentioned that I remember being absolutely terrified of the extension in the garden. It always felt like there was somebody there watching me, and I couldn't stand going to that part of the house as a kid. What she said next almost confirmed my childhood fears, as she mentioned that she'd experienced weird things down there. Her brother had lived in that part of the house and had seen all sorts of things, from doors opening to bookcases being emptied. Real movie style stuff. He had also had extreme night terrors from living there, which coincidentally stopped when he moved out. Unlucky for me, around this time I actually started having a recurring dream. The general basis of the dream was that I was in my bed and the door open, then a figure would come to my room, and then I'd wake up. The dream progressed every single night, each time with the figure getting closer to me in my bed. So fast forward just over a month, roughly a week after the armchair incident, she came to my house to watch a film. We were planning on just chilling for the evening, then I'd walk her back home. This didn't go as planned, so we both fell asleep while the film was on. Anyway, the following morning we were downstairs getting breakfast. I nipped to use the bathroom, and when I came back down she seemed a bit bothered. While I was upstairs, she glanced from the kitchen to our dining table and had seen a woman sitting there smiling. Not thinking anything of it, she went through to say hello, thinking that my mom had come down. The woman wasn't there, so she presumed that my mom had to rush off to work. Then she remembered I told her that my parents were both already at work and the rest of my family was out. She told me, trying to laugh it off as you would, so I told her about the armchair incident, which had happened about a week prior. Things all seemed to be fitting weirdly together. I had just noticed figures in my peripheral vision, not just at home but everywhere I went. It made for a pretty enjoyable time, considering I now hated going to bars and pubs due to these figures. Now, being the logical person I am, I'm not sure if I've pieced this together to try and make sense of it, but over the course of this month I was mentally in a very low point. There seemed to be some kind of correlation between my mental state and the strange things happening. Whenever these incidents occurred, I would feel low for a few days. The dreams intensified and swayed more towards sleep paralysis. I got a new job a few weeks later in a different town and moved out for the first time. Once I moved, everything stopped. I'm still not sure if it was the house or my lifestyle causing it, but at this point it doesn't really matter. Next story. About 10 years ago, I walked out to my garage to have a cigarette. If you were to walk back into my house at that point I exited, you'd step up a small concrete stair, and from there you'd go right into the kitchen and the rest of the house, or push open the sliding wood door to the basement. The kitchen provides ambient light, so you can still see inside. I watched as the door to the basement slid closed by itself, even popping the two halves of the door into its fully closed position, which would have taken a good push as it didn't fit the best. A few seconds later, it flew open. No one else was in the house, including pets. I have no idea how it could have happened. No drugs or alcohol were involved. It scared the hell out of me. I also walked out one night into the garage, opened the door to the backyard, and looking left, saw something attached to our house fly away so fast it didn't make sense. The weirdest thing is it didn't look like it took flight. Instead, it looked like something pulled off along a parabolic curve. I can't make sense of that one either, and it still scares me to this day. Before I went to bed, I brought the dogs in, locked every door and window, and turned off every inside light. I was staying up, playing on my laptop, when I thought I heard the front side door open. I could see the living room from my bedroom, so I peeked out and noticed that the computer screen was on. Only way it could be on was if the keyboard was touched or the mouse had been moved, and I saw nobody. I felt spooked, so I grabbed my pistol my dad left for me and walked through the house, loudly calling out that I wouldn't hesitate to shoot. I probably would have. I was shaking with fear. I checked the whole house, turned on every light, grabbed the dogs, double-checked the locks, they were still locked, ran into my room, locked my doors, and started texting friends in town. Keep in mind it's like 11 p.m. and almost everybody I knew was asleep. In the middle of texting, my door slammed against my door frame 3 times. No warning, no prior sounds, just bam, bam, bam. I froze in fear, staring at my door. I know I didn't imagine it because my dogs lifted their heads and ears at my door. But they didn't bark. I called the only person who was responding in hysterics. He did his best to calm me down via phone because he lived 6 hours away, and that was the best he could do. I didn't sleep at all that night. Next morning, I called my mom and told her what happened. Was she concerned? No. She got after me for not calling our neighbors for help. Really? It was 11 p.m. We lived in a tiny town of 3,000, and she wasn't worried that there was something in our house. Nothing was stolen, and I lived in the outskirts of town where the next door neighbor was a half-mile away. The things that concerns me is the dogs. They didn't bark once. One was a golden retriever and the other a yellow lab. Both would bark at anything unfamiliar and would protect me. They heard the door frame but did nothing. It still spooks me out thinking about it. 11 years later. Next story. For as long as I live, I will never forget this. It was July of 2010, and I was staying alone in my grandparents' farmhouse built in 1885 in Ontario, Canada. They all left that day, and I stayed behind because I was moving to Alberta and wanted to have some time to myself in the house before leaving. I could take the bus home to the city, so it wasn't a big deal. Plus, it was good that I did it as my grandparents sold the farm a couple of years ago. Back to the scene. I'm alone in a 125-year-old house on 100 plus acres of land in the middle of nowhere. Growing up, we all heard stories of ghosts in the house and on the property, blah blah blah, you know how it is. For anyone unaware, July in Ontario farm country is hot, so I was laying in my boxers with all the windows open, sweating my ass off trying to sleep. While spread eagle on my back, I was overcome with a cold shiver that ran from my hair to my toenails, and I could feel my hands on my arms and legs. Just as I was about to get up, those hands I felt shoved my arms to my side and shoved my legs closed. I was frozen for a minute or maybe longer. I couldn't tell. When I could get up, I scrambled to close all the windows and turned on all the lights. Once I was done doing all of that, I ran back up to the bedroom and sat on the bed thinking, I don't know what happened. I could hear a noise downstairs, so I opened the door and I could hear all the cupboards and drawers in the kitchen being opened and slammed shut. I screamed at the top of my lungs, enough! And then it was dead silent. I mean, dead silent. I went downstairs, all the lights still on, deadbolts and locks still on, doors and windows still closed. I don't remember if I slept that night, but I've never been back to the property since. Grandparents told me it was a ghost named Beatrice and that she was probably mad because I was still there, and she probably enjoyed the peace and quiet after everyone left. Next story. I'm 15 at the time and living on a new house built on the family farm in Australia. My parents work shifts, and on this night they both are out, and both of my brothers currently living at home are at separate sleepovers. My room had 2 single beds, in case a guest slept over, with a bedside table between them. On this bedside table was one of those touch lamps that had various brightness settings. Anyway, it's about 11 p.m. and I'm on my laptop in my room, and the lamp starts to flicker. I ignore it for a while, thinking it's just the bulb about to blow. The lamp goes black, and because it's the only light in my room, the only thing I can see now is the laptop screen. Then the lamp goes on again, and instead of going black, then switching back on like a lamp would with power issues, it goes from bright, mid, dim, off with like a second between each brightness change. I put my laptop off of my lap and looked at the lamp because, hey, maybe a moth was flying into the stand? It was nothing. The next thing I remember, I'm standing at the end of the hallway looking at my room and crying. My mom is home from her shift and is shaking my arm asking me what's wrong. I'm confused, but it feels like my chest is caving in. My heart is beating like crazy and my neck and head is all tingly. My mom took me into her room for the rest of the night, and I told her what happened in the morning. She had come home at around 4 a.m. and found me in the hallway. So I don't know what happened in the hours between me in my room and me in the hallway. Anyway, the next day my older brother offered to swap rooms, and that was that. I never went back into that room during the nighttime, and only if I really needed to during the day. The house and farm was sold a couple of years ago, and I remember when we went to the new house it was so much better. I haven't had anything like that happen since. Next story. When I was a young child, I lived in this super old farmhouse about 30 miles out of town. One afternoon, the school bus had dropped me off and I headed down the stairs to my bedroom for some reason. I usually just sat in my living room and watched TV. Well, the door on my bedroom didn't have a doorknob and it just had a hole cut into it. And I was laying in bed when I heard a loud thump. So I got up and looked out the hole, and as I did do that, someone had put their hand over the hole. Parents weren't home, and after a few seconds, the hand disappeared, and I booked it outside and waited for my mom to get home. Never explained what that was. Now, there were similar things that happened to me as a kid, except I used to pick also under the crack between the door and the floor to see out. A few times, home alone while my mom would be sleeping, I'd hear the sound of socked or bare feet quietly padding around outside the door. That carpet padding sound, you know? And if I looked, sometimes a black mass or a shadow would move in front of the crack. I'd book it to bed and hide under the covers, dead silent and listening. It'd be silent except for the footsteps. Sometimes it would pad away and sometimes it just stopped. When I finally mustered up the balls to check, there was nothing there. All the doors and windows shut and locked. My mom's door shut, her still sleeping and snoring. I knew it wasn't her because I'd hear her door, which was very loud because it had been broken twice. Next story. When I first moved into my home a year ago, on my bedroom closet there used to be a latch that you could put a lock on. When me and my wife first noticed, I used to joke around and say that's where the old tenants locked up the children when they were bad. One morning I was standing in the doorway of my backyard smoking a cigarette when I heard footsteps walking down my hallway, through my kitchen, past me, and walk into my bedroom closet. I swear I heard the handle turn and the closet door slam shut. Just thinking about it still freaks me out. Next story. I was about 15 or 16. My mom was at work and she was working night shift at the time and going to school. I'd had a friend over earlier in the night and noticed that our motion sensor light kept coming on when we were sitting on the basement rec room, but shrugged it off as a deer or rabbit, setting it off because we lived on the edge of town, so roaming wildlife wasn't unusual. Fast forward a few hours later, friend went home, mom was at work, and I was downstairs listening to music. Suddenly, I look up and there's a face pressed against the rec room window, looking in. Except we had that weird block glass, so I couldn't see details. I called my mom and tell her, and she tells me to call 911. About 10 minutes later, I hear voices in our driveway, so I go to look out. Two police officers are there talking to a woman. It ended up being sad. My former best friend's family lived 3 houses up and across from us, and her mentally handicapped aunt lived with them. For the most part, she was pretty functional and could go to the store on her own. But on that night, she had a mental break and got disoriented on the way home, and had apparently been wandering the backyards on our side of the street for hours. It was pretty cold that night, so if I hadn't seen her, it could have ended up being a lot worse. I'm guessing she looked in our window because we have the only finished basement on the street, so it was the only window low enough for her to peek into. Next story. When I was about 11 or 12, we had a bird in a cage on our balcony, and our house backed onto the bushland down to a river. This was in Australia. I remember the bird started going nuts, screeching and squawking, and I thought maybe a magpie was attacking it or something, so I went out, and there was a man halfway up the stairs to the back door. I can still picture exactly what he looked like. 50s, dirty canvas shorts, and a faded t-shirt, gray hair, tanned and leathery. I freaked out and bolted inside, locking the balcony door. Then I remembered there were 2 other doors that led to the balcony, so I bolted to them and locked them. Then I freaked out he might have made his way to the front, so I sprinted up there and locked those doors. Then I sat in the middle of my lounge room with an antique hunting knife my stepdad had collected in his travels to Africa and waited for my mom to get home. A fair few houses had been broken into recently, and I had to chat to the police, but nothing ever came of it. Thanks, little birdie, for potentially saving me. Next story. When I was about 7 or 8, my parents used to let me and my sister, who was about 11 at the time, sleep in a tent in the back garden as it was a reasonably safe neighborhood. So we would be outside on our own and we were fine with it. But one night, we were sleeping when all of a sudden, we both woke up to a loud helicopter flying over us and police sirens nearby. In all the shock, we both got up and went to go inside. Once inside, we locked the back door, and then we both saw a man dressed in black jump over a fence screaming for us to open it for a solid 5 minutes. Naturally, we were shocked and didn't so he shortly just ran away, but we couldn't sleep the rest of that night out of panic and fear. We also spent years with nightmares after that. The next day we found out from our neighbors that the guy had been robbing local houses for weeks and had just robbed them that night. People said the reason the police caught him was due to the fact that he stopped to try and get us to open our door for so long and was able to be surrounded in the next garden over. Next story. So let's go way back to middle school. I can't remember exactly, but my best guess would be that I was like 10 or 12 years old. I was getting abused at home by my father, and I was being bullied at school by the other kids. My mom was the only person who understood that, so she let me fake being sick to stay home from school sometimes just to get a break. Now, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but my childhood house was weird, and we all think it was haunted. There would be multiple times when everyone who lived there, would hear occasional voices that weren't there. We would just get this feeling that we were being watched. We would randomly start feeling just weird and wrong. And I honestly don't have a better way to explain that, but we all felt it. The most common thing, though, was that we would hear footsteps in the hallway and even see the shadows of feet from the gaps under our doors. Like I said, I don't want to say I believe in ghosts, but something about that house just wasn't right. So back to the story. I was getting abused at home and bullied at school, and particularly hard lately, so I coordinated with my mom that we would fake me being sick so I could get the day home alone to recover and rest. After everyone left and I was home alone, I just felt wrong and uneasy the whole time, but I couldn't explain why. Then later on in the day, I guess early afternoon around 3 or so, I occasionally heard footsteps or two in the hallway. Now, I'm like 10 or 12 and I'm hearing footsteps in my house, so I'm terrified. And I'm not talking faint and quiet footsteps. I'm talking a full-grown man wearing steel-toed boot footsteps. So I'm freaking out at this point and trying to reassure myself. My thinking was, okay, this is scary, but all that's ever happened is this thing has made noises and made us feel weird, so it can't hurt us, right? Then, out of nowhere, all the lights in the house cut off, and all the toilets in the house flushed at the same time. I tried to comfort myself by saying that it was just sensory stuff, but then almost like it read my mind and called my bluff. Whatever it was manifested into a physical material action for the first time, so I felt exposed and threatened. So at this point, being 10 or 12 years old, I was freaking out. And since the only source of support in my life at that time was my mom, I called her while she's at work and I just started crying and yelling about what's happening and how scared I am. Then, inexplicably, after I finished pouring everything out on her, and she's finally able to start talking to comfort me, it all stopped. Now I'm 23, so I'm at least twice the age I was then when this happened, and I still haven't come up with an explanation for it.